Thank you very much for being here today, Mark.
Great to be with you both.
So Mark, you and us, we were in Australia, I think around the same time, but we never met there. We actually met in Mauritius, and that's quite crazy. Do you just want to maybe tell us a bit about your background, your journey, and how did you end up coming back to Mauritius?
Sure. So, I was born in Mauritius. My mother's Mauritian and my father's from Zimbabwe, of Dutch heritage, hence the surname. So we lived here till I was 10 years old. I went to Alexander House School in Mauritius.
Yeah.
And then moved to Zimbabwe. So did most of this, I guess, the second part of my primary school there, or my high school there.
Yeah, wow.
And then while I was studying at University of Cape Town, would obviously come back to Zim. My father was a farmer in Zimbabwe. Like I said, I studied finance accounting at the University of Cape Town. Joined KPMG in their financial services audit business, and focused on asset management and life insurance companies. And then post that, decided to get some experience in, I guess, one of the financial capitals of the world. We wanted to be in the sunshine, so we decided Sydney was a good place.
Yeah.
So moved across to Sydney, and spent about a year and a half, 2 years at Macquarie Bank, a big investment bank there. I was in the finance team for their structured products division. And at that point, I guess, after being there for a while, I realized that I didn't want to stay in, I guess, finance as a function. So I did my MBA with the objective of moving into management consulting. And I was lucky enough to get a job at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. So I started with BCG in Sydney, spent just over a year and a half, a year and 3/4 with them in Sydney, focused actually mainly on airlines. So Qantas was my main client in Sydney that I worked on. And BCG opened up an office in Johannesburg. So they had a global call out of people interested to move to Johannesburg. So I put my hand up. I always wanted to come back to Africa. And then I was one of the 4 founding members of the BCG office in Johannesburg. So it was a very exciting time to be part of effectively a startup, even though there was a big, I guess, company behind us supporting us. And I guess given the nature of the SA economy, my focus in South Africa was from an industry perspective was mining and petrochemicals. And then from a functional or topic expertise was strategy and large scale restructuring or transformation, which actually helped a hell of a lot with, I guess, my role as a CEO. And then down, about 4 years into the job in Johannesburg, if you work in management consulting with companies like BCG, McKinsey, etc., there's very much no life in the work-life balance. So effectively, after discussion with my wife, decided that I'd look for something else, and looked in Joburg and then Mauritius, given my wife is Mauritian and I had Mauritian roots, and I landed a job as MD of Cim Finance in Mauritius, and came back to Mauritius.
And then became the CEO of the group.
Then after just under 2 years, took over as group CEO of the group.
So you're the CEO of a large listed company, financial company, and many would say this is like the ultimate position. Therefore, you have to be happy. Like you come on, you must be really thrilled with where you've ended up in life. But what could you say that happiness is to you? Is it linked to your career success, or tell us a bit about it?
It's a great question, and I think it's something that I've really struggled with and still coming to terms with. I think I was very much focused on my career, I guess, for probably the first 18 years of my professional life, and I guess through hard work and I guess the right choices got to where I was. But I think it's, the story. I went through quite a big burnout about 4 years ago. Just continued, even though I changed jobs. In consulting, I was working 16 to 20 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. So it was, I guess you can do that when you're relatively young. Came back here and carried on doing that, and had a burnout, which was a terrible experience. But I think also it was a good, I'm glad I went through it in the context that it made me realize that I'm not indestructible, but also made me realize that actually I'm focusing way too much on my work. And speaking to my wife afterwards and just doing some self-reflection, realized that I pretty much hadn't put much time or thought into spending more time with my family, my friends, and really thinking through what makes me happy, which I guess is the context of this discussion.
It totally is. In fact, just to give you some context, and I think you and I talked about this quite recently, we feel that teaching happiness needs to start from a young age, because when you're, let's say, in your 30s or 40s, and then realize, that, hey, life is turning, too much this and that, then you feel a bit lost, and then boom, and then what do? And so this is, in fact, one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, and to tell people, actually, happiness is not just by making it, and I suppose, like you said, even the fact that you're a CEO, I think it is one of the factors, right, that still makes happiness happen. But would you say it is one of the main ones?
It's a very good question. I think I can answer it from my own perspective.
Yes, definitely.
Because obviously it's very different to different people. I think it depends on where you are in your career as well, and what you aspire to do in your career. But for me, I think it was I guess an aha moment for me was after I went through that burnout. I actually had some strategic advisors advising us at the time on what I guess our strategic path for Cim for the next couple of years, and had a meeting with them. And and I joined the two senior advisors for this meeting, and they said, "Mark, we've been working with you for about 6 months now. We're not going to talk about the company. We're going to talk about you. We've seen how you've worked." And the one gentleman said, "Okay, I've been through a very similar situation with you, and it almost ruined my marriage. And this is how I've figured out what's important in my life." And he said, "First and foremost, you need to be happy yourself. So figure out what makes you happy. If that means you want to exercise, you want to dive, you want to play sports, whatever it is, you need to be happy. Because if you're not happy yourself, then the people around you won't. You can't be happy with them." Then if if you're married or you've got a partner, make sure that you spend time to be able to be happy in that relationship. Then if you've got kids, which I do, make sure you spend enough time to be happy with your kids. And then fourthly, make sure you spend time with your friends. And then only think about work. So I think it's not to say that you should spend more time with the first four things than the last thing, because ultimately your job, and depending on your level of job, requires a lot of time, and it's going to be 60, 70, 80% of the time that you spend during the week is on your job. But you need to make sure that you do enough for yourself, your wife, your kids, your friends, if you have that family construct, to be happy there. So I think that's, and I'm probably 2-3 years down the line and still trying to make that right balance. But I think it was a fantastic conversation. I think it's something that my wife helps me a lot with. So it really helps having a tough but supportive wife. I think it's really helped me to frame that up. And for simple examples for me is now I make sure that I leave office at 5:36 at the latest, if required. I usually put the last 2 meetings or calls in my car on the way home.
Okay.
So by the time I get home at 6:30, it's I switch off from work completely. And then we make sure that the last few years we have dinner with our kids all the time. And it's not just about not bringing work home, as in not working on the laptop afterwards. It's also I used to not be present at home. So I come home, I'll be thinking of the issues that happened in the day, thinking what I need to do tomorrow, and sitting at the table and kids asking me questions and not getting any answers. So I really had to put, I guess, processes in place to put my phone away when I got home, out the way, and then really, I guess, do your breathing exercises or just do something that just clears your mind, that you can be present for those few hours with your wife and kids. And I wake up early, so I can work early, but it's dependent on everyone, how you want to structure your day. But I think it's so important to make sure that you spend that quality time with the people that are important to you in your family context every day, and then make sure that you develop the friendships, because as people, I truly believe that if you don't have the love from family, the love that you get from friendships, you will never be happy.
Yeah.
And it's, you can achieve all you want financially, materially, but at the end of the day, if you look back on your life and you don't have those important relationships, like what does your life mean?
Yeah, that's so true. Do you have favorite points in your day that are like typically a happy or joy-filled occasion, or is it more like my original question was going to be, can you tell me 3 times that you've been really, really happy or joy-filled in your life? But then I was thinking we could end up with a bit of a cliche kind of answer there. You're welcome to give that if you want, but or would you prefer to say, these times in my day I really love, like those?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a few things. I mean, like I guess you shared those questions with me. So I guess I could say the cliche, which definitely like marrying my wife, having my kids, and a few special moments with my wife on some nice big trips. But I think ultimately it's just spending the time each day when you get home and hearing about your kids' day is great. But then on the weekend, we really make sure we do something nice with the kids. We're lucky enough to have a boat. If you don't have that, just, I mean, whatever your kids and wife enjoying together, we try and do something like that with our kids. We try and spend like at least one or two things with our friends on the weekend. But then I think it's, we're fortunate enough that we can afford to travel. So we really focus a lot of, we make a big effort every year to do at least 1 or 2 trips with our kids. My wife and I do at least one trip ourselves as well, just the 2 of us. Just to spend that special time together and live those special moments.
Yeah. When I look at her photos, I'm like, couple goals.
Yes, indeed.
Great. No, but truly, I think, like even when I've heard about your story and your burnout, etc., it's really spoken to me a lot. And I hope and I'm sure actually that a lot of people will be impacted positively by listening to you today. I just wanted to go back to something that you said about switching off. Okay, so when you go back home, you switch off. But there are occasions that you can't really switch off. I mean, I remember actually once you came over to our place and everyone was inside for dinner and you were still, in the car, like finishing off something. Yeah. And I understand deadlines sometimes happen and they encroach on your family time, personal space. How do you navigate around those?
That's a good question. I think it's all about planning and being clear to your family when you need that time for work. So, for example, on Sunday, I had a lot of stuff I needed to get through. I was in Kenya last week for business, and then came back. I got a lot of stuff I need to get done this week. So I told my wife, look, I need at least 5-6 hours on Sunday just to work. And she was fine. It's set that up, and then if it's in the evening, I'll come back home and just say, look, I'll have a quick dinner with you, but then I need 2-3 hours this evening to work. So I think it's because sometimes you just tiptoe around the issue, but rather just say, look, you try your hardest, but then when there is a big deadline or something, you just be clear and explicit up front that you need to carve that time out, and I think that's fine. Huh? I mean, the reality is it's everyone, I guess if you're in a fairly senior job, or even if you're not, you are going to have those deadlines. So you just need to commit to getting it done and making sure that your partner, your friends, whoever it is that's impacted, understand that.
And traveling, I mean, you do a fair bit of traveling. You go to Kenya quite regularly. The other day you were in India. I mean, when you go away for a chunky piece of time, how then do you still make it work with your kids, with home?
Yes, I think I don't, in reality I probably travel once every 2 or 3 months. It's not a huge, for 1 week at a time. So it's not a huge amount of travel compared to a lot of people I know, but when I travel, I try and leave on a Sunday evening, get back on a Friday. So I guess it doesn't impact too much on our time we'd spend together on a weekend. And then just every evening, give my wife and the kids a call and catch up, So I think it's just carving out the time to catch up with them.
So you kind of adapt when it happens.
Some people would say, well, now I have to focus on my career, and then after I've made it, after I get that promotion, or when I achieve blah, then I'll be happy, or then I can relax. What would you say to that?
I guess having experienced what I've experienced, I think it's, I think that's, I think in the first instance, if I hadn't worked as hard, because I thought about this a lot, and I think if I hadn't worked as hard as I did for as long as I did, like the first 15 to 18 years of my career, maybe I wouldn't have got to where I got to.
Yeah.
So I'm happy I did work that hard, but with hindsight, I could have put more, I guess more like boundaries in place. Because I think a lot of the time, especially when you're more junior, you fear asking your direct report to your boss, like, I've got a wife and kids at home, like, can I go home? I mean, I was, I guess, like it's like in the BCG example I gave you, I mean, I was relatively, like old, if you want to call it there, or had a family where there's much more younger guys on the team. So I guess when I first started in Joburg, I was working for like project managers who came from Germany, and they were just working there for the week. And they didn't really understand my family construct. But then when I took over...
And they're Germans. Sorry.
No, but I learned, like, I mean, that said, I learned more from them than I could have ever hoped for. So I'm very grateful for that experience. But yeah, when I became a project manager and a junior partner, which at BCG we call a principal, I made sure, because it was important to me, I made sure that we worked damn hard. So we get to the office at 8, work till 5:36, and then everyone can go home. And I went home and try to have dinner with my wife and kids and spend a bit of time with them, but then I knew I'd have to work to midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, I mean, that's just the job. So I think if you were able to carve out, because all my team were able to carve out those 2 hours where they could go home, see their loved ones, or do gym, whatever it was, they really appreciated that. So I think it's, and with hindsight, I should have actually pushed more when I was younger to say, well, I'll get the work done, trust me, but I just need 2 hours where I can go and do what I need to do with my family. So I think so going back to your question, I think it's super important to make sure you can work hard. I think when you're younger, you have the capacity to work longer hours and sleep less. I found out when I'm older, you can't. But I think it's still, I would say it's really important to make sure you spend enough time to make yourself happy, your wife, your friends, spend time with your friends, etc. Because I think it's, otherwise you get 10, 15 years down the line and then you look around and you think, well, like, what truly meaningful friendships have I got, and have I really put enough into my marriage, my partnership, whatever it is.
So on that note, find something that you like, and derive happiness from it. A lot of people, and driven people, and I suppose you would have come across those people either in Macquarie Investment Bank or when you were at BCG, and when I was in banking, it was people who find passion, who make their job their passion, and outside of job there's nothing, because that's what drives them. They're probably workaholics. So what's your message to them? Have you come across those people, and if people in our audience are like that, they relate to that, what would you say?
I came across that person in myself. I mean, the first diagnosis was that I was a workaholic. So I just worked way too hard. And like I said, I think it's good that I worked hard, but with hindsight, I should have spent more time doing like the important stuff to make you happy that I mentioned. And it's, I think, Rishi, it's all depends on what drives you and makes you happy. So if your I guess life goal is just to work hard and do incredibly well, and that's what makes you happy, then so be it. I think it's completely dependent on like each individual person. But I think you do need to spend the time and reflect and think, like, it's because I think in general most people are truly happy when they have meaningful relationships. That whether that's with your wife, your husband, your partner, your kids, your friends. To me, that's what brings meaning to your life. So I think you need to reflect on that hard and think through, have you done, is that where are you in regards to that? And then if relationships don't matter, then I mean,
I think as long as that's communicated to the people in your world, then that's
But I also do think that there is an element of hindsight, because when you're there in the thick of it, it's like you live in a bubble, you know, and you feel, well, all the workers, all the people, all the analysts or associates or whatever in the investment bank, they are working those long hours, and this is how we are. You know, you're conditioned to think this way. But then there is life outside of work, and some of those things that you mentioned, like family, children, relationships, meaningful relationships, people take them for granted. Don't you agree?
For sure. I mean, even my wife gave me feedback that she felt that I was taking it completely for granted, and and you don't want to get a situation where then that becomes like an animosity towards you because you think, because I mean the perception that I think that gave to my wife was that work was more important than her, you know, which certainly shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, sure. Something that Rishi and I have really admired about you and your family is that, well, especially you and Camilla, you are very involved in the girls' school. Your job it takes up a lot of your time, but you still make the time to be, you know, you're on the board of a school, and you also, you know, your wife volunteers a lot. How, you know, do you make that work?
Well, for me, I'm on the board, right? So it's I was on the board at IPS, the junior school. So that was a once a month commitment, probably 10 times a year. And then now I'm on the board of Northfields, the secondary school, and that's a quarterly commitment with a board and then 2 subcommittees. So I think in reality, it's like you're looking at 4 to 5 hours a quarter.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not. So it is a commitment. Obviously, there's other. Maybe it's 6 to 8, but if you add all the prep and stuff, but I mean, the reality is, it does encroach into personal time. But I mean, I've always been passionate about education.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I was in BCG, we actually did lots of non-profit work and focused on education, and I ended up being on the board of a non-profit education organization there. So I think for me, it's something that I'm passionate about, like in terms of education, and because my kids are there, it's more meaningful as well. So I'm happy to carve out that 6 to 8 hours every quarter, which I guess is about 2 hours a month. It's a matter of just work. I guess you're balancing your work life a little bit more, but I think everyone's got extra commitments, right? Huh?
Yeah.
People, whether it's extracurricular activities or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, as a corporate parent, do you feel that it's important that you're personally involved in your child's life and what they do or activities?
Definitely, and I think like through the process that I mentioned before, I really realized I didn't spend enough time in my children's lives. Like I always had the excuse that I couldn't attend this because I had work, I couldn't attend that because I had work, and and then when I did go to something, whether it was a sports day or like a drama show, whatever it was, you could see how much it meant to my kids. So I guess I had to make a conscientious effort to say, well, this is important to my kids if I'm there. Put it in your diary, So I think you can use the excuse that like you've got too much work. I think you need to, and not to say that you take 6 to 8 hours a week out of your work week to spend time with your kids during the work day, but I think for the important occasions, you should try and carve that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of feel like it depends on the culture of the company that one works at, but I do feel like in general, this new generation that's in the workforce are more confident. I don't know whether that's just my observation, but they do seem more confident in asking for time out. Have you seen that happening more and more in your
certainly, and I think it's our generation probably, we didn't want to ask those questions. But I think you would have found, if you'd asked them, your direct report probably had kids and family as well. I would have thought, well, of course you can,
Yeah.
Like I still get lots of people saying, can I go and go to the kid, see my kids' drama show or swimming gone on? Of course you can.
Yeah.
And it's you can see they almost feel embarrassed asking you, and it's. I guess it certainly is about the culture of the organization, but I also think it's up to every individual just to, if you don't ask the question, you never know.
Yeah.
And if your direct report to your company is not going to let you do that, then I think you should question like, is that the right company you want to be at?
Yeah.
But I think in the first instance, if you don't ask, you need to ask the questions. I'm sure most people would be very understanding and let you do that.
Yeah. So Mark, you're a CEO of a listed company. You've had tons of experience globally. Don't you worry that your children see this as a standard for making it, to accomplish something in life and then be happy?
Not really. I think the one thing I love about my parents is not once did they ever push me to do well academically, and they kind of let us be. And then, I mean, I was a big sportsman at school, so I played rugby for Zimbabwe at a schoolboy level, and yeah, if I look, and with hindsight, I didn't put enough effort at all into my A levels. I'm not going to tell you what my A level marks were, but they were quite embarrassing when I compare them to someone like you. But I certainly made up for that at uni and during my MBA. But I guess they let us learn and chase what we were passionate about, and they were always there to support us. So Camilla, my wife, and I have really adopted that. We make sure that they do their homework, etc., but we're not going to tell them, you need to get 70, 80%, you need to get into this university. I think it's up to, our view anyway as parents is that our kids must do what they're interested in, passionate about. I mean, it's very hard to find out when you're a young child, obviously, and even in your teens or early 20s, but
for sure.
I think if you're there to support them, and the message that we give our children is just do something that you're passionate about. And it's not like, just because I'm a CEO, it doesn't mean that's the ultimate level of success for my kids. I think the ultimate level of success for my kids is they've got 3 girls, so they eventually find a partner that they love. If they want a family, they can build a beautiful family. They develop friendships and do a job that they enjoy doing.
I would like to say thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom to our audience.
I'm sure
like I said,
gold to many people.
I'm sure that has positively impacted a lot of our audience. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks, Sharon. Great being here.
Thank you.